and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we pull our favorite books down off the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. Joining me today, we've got Tony Pasculi.
Happy to be here again.
Of course, I'm Tom Galley, and today we are talking about one of Tony's favorites. Tell us a little bit about this.
So this is a standalone novel called Gateway by Frederick Pohl, and actually expanded into a series later on after the success of the initial book. And there's a couple of things I love about this book. There's also one that I just hate, but that's okay. Put up with it. But this is mind-blowing science fiction, which is my favorite category. There's so many big ideas here. That's a big part of what I love about it. But there's also this sort of a lottery aspect to it, which makes it really, really compelling.
Yeah, there's definitely chock-a-block with big ideas.
Yeah.
I cannot fault it for that. And for being such a small book, I'm impressed at how much is crammed into that.
It's a surprisingly thin story. So there's two actual storylines. The main character is Rob Broadhead, and he's leading a crappy life on planet Earth, and he wins a lottery, and he spends his entire lottery winnings to buy a ticket to Gateway, which is an asteroid that has been converted into a space station by a previous, now missing civilization called the Hichi, alien civilization. And this asteroid is dotted with spaceships, which they can use to launch expeditions into the far reaches of the universe, but they have very little idea of how to control them. And so a lot of them don't come back. So it's a real roll of the dice if you want to do this or not. But if you do it and you discover something scientifically useful or just fascinating or commercially exploitable, you can become rich beyond your wildest dreams. And then the other story is this same character later in therapy. And I remember this part of the book. I remember not being my favorite part of the book, but I didn't remember that it was literally half of the book. Mm-hmm. It is, and it's a little bit of a drag. But that works in a neat way, which we'll talk about later. So, yeah. Yeah,
so the structure of this, right, is we have a chapter that's a therapy session followed by a chapter that's an exploration of his life, mm-hmm. moving forward into, becoming what they call a prospector. Yeah. And it alternates back and forth like that. And like I say, it starts off with him in therapy, which did not grip me. If I had been sitting in a bookstore and said to myself, I'm going to read the first chapter of 10 books to decide which one I would buy, I would not have bought this one.
Yeah.
I was a little bit more committed to getting through it, though. And, by the time I'm 5 or 6 chapters in, it becomes compelling.
Good. Well, that's a relief. So since you brought up structure, here's what the structure does do that I like, that almost justifies all those tedious psychoanalysis scenes, is that we have two independent timelines that are building towards the exact same climactic event. We have it from the past, we're approaching it from the past, boom, and we stop there, and we have it from the future after that event, but we're digging it out of his subconscious to find out why he is the way he is and why he's in therapy, and we approach it from that timeline as well, and they land in the same place. And that is, when that impact happens, when that crossover happens, that's really exhilarating.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So there are, let's start by talking about stuff that I enjoyed or that we enjoyed. And some of the big ideas here. One of the most fascinating things to me is the entire world is just so unbelievably poor and destitute. These people who are physically laboring for their lives. They're literally miners. Rob was literally a miner digging for shale oil.
For food.
Which they use to grow food, which they're eating the mold that grows on this thing. And he's making enough money for a comfortable life. By comfortable life, it means that he has a place to stay. He can go out and get drunk every so often. And that's about it. This is what he has to look forward to. And they never use the word insurance, but so much of this book is about medical insurance. Yes. You haven't made it unless you can afford full medical and still have enough money to live afterwards. Yeah. Maybe you could afford major medical and still have enough money to live afterwards, but there are several times, you've got a character that has a $1 million payout, a $1 million bonus. And to decide whether that's a lot or not, what we find out is it's enough to buy full medical, but you wouldn't have anywhere to live afterwards because all of your money would have gone into this insurance. You would no longer be able to sustain yourself.
Now, to be fair, full medical in the book is light years beyond what we talk about. We consider
Organ
comprehensive
replacement, limb regrowth. You're talking about adding 50 years to your lifespan. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it is science fiction. So full medical and major medical are a bigger deal. But still, one of the things that separates the haves from the have-nots is, can you afford insurance?
Yeah. Also, can you afford to eat real food? And the answer for 95% of the population is no, you can't. You have to eat the mold that's grown on petroleum that's mined from the earth. It's just,
Yep.
It's pretty dystopian. Fortunately, we don't spend a lot of time on Earth before we get to Gateway, which is much more interesting. But I think this comes out around the Soylent Green era, when one of the pressing problems of humanity was overpopulation. We thought overpopulation was going to be the thing that destroyed us. And so it becomes a recurring theme of the series. There are actually other books in this, is how are we going to feed all these people?
Yep. Yeah. And I love, another one of the big ideas I love is we find this miraculous thing, right? They accidentally find Hichi ruins on Venus. So we're tech savvy and advanced enough that we've gotten around to exploring Venus. And from those Hichi ruins, they accidentally discover a ship that takes them to this asteroid that happens to be covered with FTL ships. But the biggest of them, the biggest FTL ship available to us, holds 5 people.
Yeah.
So our exploration is, in ships that we think are 500,000 years old. They haven't been maintained in 500,000 years. I mean, that's long enough for an evolution of species to occur, right?
Yep.
We've kind of figured out how to make them go places, but we can't predict where those places are or what's there. All we know is that the Hichi at some point went there.
Yeah.
We don't know how far it is or how long it'll take them to get there. We don't know what the conditions will be at that location.
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to explore the universe. In derelict spaceships, we're going to climb into and cross our fingers and hope they go somewhere before our food and oxygen run out that's actually of use and bring us back.
It's a detail that I love, is that they celebrate turnaround point, because it means if you've calculated your food properly and you get to turnaround point and you still have only eaten half of your food, it means you will live to get home.
Yep. They have lotteries, suicide lotteries for the ships that have crews of 3 or 5 people.
Yeah.
If they make it past a certain point and it becomes obvious there aren't enough food or not enough oxygen on the ship, somebody suicides.
Yeah. And then you mentioned these ships are 500,000 years old, and that's significant because they're programmed to preset destinations, or they put in destinations where they just know that they're going to be interesting in some way. But conditions have changed in the last 500,000 years, and a star that was still on the main line may now be a red giant. And when you show up in a tight orbit, you may be inside the star now, and that's going to be bad for you.
Yep. So the idea, and this is actually, this incredible randomness and risk is central to the problems that are being suffered by the lead character all the way through.
Yeah.
While he's a miner on Earth, his entire vision of success is make enough money that I could get out of here, that I could get to Gateway and become a prospector. When he gets to Gateway and he sees the reality of it, suddenly he realizes, I don't have the nerve for this. I cannot lock myself in a tin can that's 500,000 years old, punch in some coordinates that I don't know where they're going to take me.
Yeah.
I may or may not have the supplies to survive the round trip, assuming the destination doesn't kill me. I can't do it.
Yeah. And, even if you can get over your anxiety, the trip itself is incredibly unpleasant. It's like 5 people. 5 is about the size of a studio apartment. So you have 5 people sharing the space for 180 days, maybe longer. It's just, one of the things that happens, just aside from the normal group dynamics, is there's one episode where a guy just goes crazy and tries to kill everyone else in his crew.
Yeah.
Just because he snaps. Yeah. So.
Yep. So the idea that this is what space exploration looks like is just bizarre to me. And the fact that it doesn't actually matter if we manage to get it right. Even if we find a new Eden out there, we could only move people to it 4 at a time.
Yeah.
On an Earth that's so overpopulated with so many poor, starving people. It's really hopeless.
It's a grim, it's a grim view of the universe, and normally that's not my cup of tea. But the sort of randomness of it is so compelling, the lottery aspect, And also, it's the first book in a series that becomes much more hopeful as it goes on. Yeah,
I was going to ask you if it was worth my time to pursue the series.
I think it is. I think if you find this first book mind-blowing, you will find the second book even more mind-blowing.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
The button for book 2 is one of the best buttons for any book I've ever read. It's just like, what? And I can't spoil it for you. I'm sorry, but it's so good.
Well, I'm looking forward. This is definitely on my radar now. Definitely something I'm interested in pursuing.
Oh, I can tell you this though. One of the big mysteries throughout this book is, where did the Hichi go? They were the incredibly advanced race, and it's like the what is that famous ghost story where they encounter a ship in the high seas?
The Flying Dutchman?
It's not the Flying Dutchman. It's like the wreck of the Mary Celeste or something like that. Where as they board to see if there are any survivors, they find that there's still a fire in the galley. Everyone just left. There's no one on this boat, but there's still like warm food out. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. The Hichi just up and leave, and it's like all their artifacts are in perfect condition. They just left their stuff behind. They didn't pack up and move in an orderly fashion.
They took most of their stuff.
They took most of their stuff. Yeah.
They left behind spaceships. And do they just, yes or no question, do they ever tell us what the prayer fans actually are?
Book 2.
Because I have a theory about that.
Ah, okay. We can talk about it afterwards. We don't want to spoil it for anyone else.
Of course not.
Yeah. But we do get an answer to what happened to the Hichi in book 2, which is that mind-blowing thing at the end. Yeah. It's a lot of mysteries. It's easy to make a mystery that's very compelling because it's mysterious. It's like, why is there a polar bear on the island and lost? And it never pays off. And you're like, this is one of those mysteries that pays off. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mentioned I had some homework to do. I had some homework to do on this book, and I failed to do it. This is what I was going to look up. They talk about the way that Hichi write numbers. It's different the way that we write numbers. Apparently the Hichi, this is a quote, apparently the Hichi expressed numbers as sums of primes and exponents, but that's all way over my head. We sort of do that, except for the prime aspect. We express numbers in terms of units and exponents, not primes. But the primes made me think of the fundamental theorem of arithmetic, which you can take any number and break it down into its prime factors, and that's a canonical representation. And I'm wondering if he's mentioning something like that, if there's some unique numerical notation system based on the fundamental theorem of arithmetic, but I did not bother to sit and work it out. So if anybody's listening and they're a mathematician with some spare time on their hands, maybe you can explore that for us and get back to us. Yeah.
Now, they say something else in the book that caught my interest, and then I didn't really know what to do with it. But he says, one of the working theories is apparently the Hichi visualized numbers 3-dimensionally like primitive man and not 2-dimensionally like we do.
Yeah, okay, I noted that also.
And I have no idea what that means because, I don't know, maybe I'm not a primitive enough man I don't know what a 3-dimensional number is.
He doesn't, so he says something a little bit different. Here's the actual quote. The prime ordering isn't from bottom to top, but from front to back, which says something or other about the Hichi. They were 3D oriented like primitive man instead of 2D oriented. So rather than laying the numbers out linearly across from left to right, I assume that's what he means, or like this. They're like this. So the number line sort of extends beyond you and behind you instead of being arrayed in front of you. I assume that's what he means. Yeah.
I'll have to find a Hichi to explain it to me.
It's not super clear.
It might not have been super clear to him. Maybe it was just a neat sounding thing.
Yeah.
And again, the person that's telling us this is not highly educated. He's not highly educated, rather, and not a mathematician. Yeah.
So the couple other things that jumped out at me is just curiosities, again, from, this book was written a while ago. And one is that on this space station where oxygen is the thing you have to pay for, they allow smoking.
This has always been a rub with me on submarine movies, too.
Yeah. Apparently they actually let you do it in a submarine, an actual submarine in World War II. That was something they did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know how or why, but smoking was so accepted that it was just, of course, they can't step outside to smoke. Yeah. So, and the other one was he talks about the vast wealth that accrues to that. So when they discover the Gateway artifact, rather than sort of one nation taking it over and nationalizing it, they set up a number of nations cooperate to create the Gateway Corporation. and all profits flow into and through the Gateway Corporation and out to prospectors and so on that hit big scores. And they talk about the incredible riches of the Gateway Corporation as the sole exploiters of basically this ancient alien race and all of the universe. And their total revenues exceed $3.7 trillion. And I'm like, that's not a lot of money.
This was written when?
That's a good question. I don't remember actually when it was written.
But was that... They give us, there's in one of the little window sidebars, what do you call the page within a page things, Steve?
Oh, sidebars is good.
Okay.
Let's call them
so in one of the
sidebars.
sidebars, there's actually a thing about the revenue stream, but it was a report for one orbit, which is how they measure time on Gateway. And how long it takes. I assume that's how long it takes Gateway itself to come back to the same spot in its orbit. So while you're looking for that, one of the things that I found fun was the fact that we didn't accidentally discover Gateway just because it was in an odd place.
Yeah.
It's not that it was hidden, right? It's between the orbits of Venus and Mars, but it's at 90 degrees to the solar system. So apparently, what he says is most astronomy is oriented away from the sun, and most of it's also oriented on the ecliptic.
Yeah.
So it was right there, a relatively easy body to find because it's made out of shiny glowing metal.
Yeah.
Just never thought to look.
No one was looking there. Yeah. So Gateway came out in 1977. So around the same time as the Star Trek Log 10, which is 1978, Star Wars, which is also 1977. Yeah.
So $3 trillion was not a phenomenally large amount of money.
Even back then, it wasn't a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
More than the GDP of the United States at that time, but probably not excessively
But we don't know what the economy has done with all its overpopulation and food shortages and whatnot.
Yeah.
Although he does, his life in New York, he does tell us his rent is $18,000 a month.
Yeah.
Which even today for a New York apartment sounds like a lot of money.
Does it?
To me, it does.
Not for a penthouse. Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, for like a studio or something, for a college student, yeah. But for someone, I don't know, for
someone
star,
who's rich, he's got a spread. He's got several houses.
His richness is underwhelming. He's got, I think, $10 million. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
sure.
Well, again, we don't know what the scale is. On a scale where mind-numbingly rich is $3 trillion, $10 million is a pretty healthy chunk of change.
So another preview of book 2, he becomes much, much richer. Like, world-alteringly rich. Yeah. Like politicians in his back pocket rich. So, yeah.
Can we move on to something that just bothered the crap out of me?
Yes, by all means.
Frederick Pohl made a mistake.
Oh, no.
He gave us numbers.
Oh, and you checked the numbers?
He gave us something objective to look at, and I am exactly the sort of reader that if you give me numbers, I will look at them. If you give me facts, I will look at them.
Yeah.
So when we start off, he says roughly 15% of all flights don't return.
Yeah.
Okay, this is in the first few pages of the book. So that doesn't sound too bad.
No, it sounds like a lot, actually. That's a significant amount of attrition because of a limited number of ships. Is that where you're going?
Well, that's amongst the things I'm going to. So a little bit further, he's describing Gateway. And Gateway, when they found it, had 924 ships on it. Mm-hmm. Now, there's the majority of these actually have not been used yet. But so far, they found about 200 that don't work. And they have another 304 that have been used. The remainder there, the other 500 or other 400 some odd, haven't actually been turned on yet or even tried yet. Okay. So further in the book, he and his girlfriend, what's her name?
Clara.
Yeah. They've wandered into this room where there are these displays that have the current statistics.
Yeah.
And out of those, while they are there, it increments up. There have been 2,357 launches. There have been 841 successful returns. Successful return defined by the ship made it back. Doesn't care if the crew's alive or not.
Okay.
Which means there are 1,516
unsuccessful launches.
Now, some of those might still be in transit. give them 100 of them. That's 1,400 ships that are lost. That's 500 more ships than are on Gateway.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It is also a survival rate of a little bit under 1 in 3.
Yeah.
It's a survival rate somewhere around 30%.
So that makes me wonder about the definition of successful launch there. Successful launch is definitely one that comes back and not one that deserves a bonus, a payout.
It just says launches and successful returns.
Oh, okay. Successful returns.
So launches, the ship went away. Successful returns, the ship came back.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's
that,
wrong.
That does not work. A, there aren't enough ships for that to be true. And B, with a 1 in 3 survival rate, you cannot have people walking around with 6 or 7 bangles on their arm.
Yeah.
It can't happen. You cannot survive a 1 in 3 survival rate trip 7 times. It just is statistically impossible.
Well,
now Gateway 2 adds to this. There are 150 more ships on Gateway 2.
Yep.
Still not enough to account for our math.
Yep.
And then even later, we have 74 vessels that returned from launch. 20 were judged lost. That's high above 15% loss. And this is from that Orbit 37 report, which was what we were looking for the money too. So on 4 different locations, he gives us numbers about how many ships there are, the launch rates, the survival rates in different ways, and none of them correspond with each other. And in fact, they preclude each other.
It's interesting. Frederick Pohl's strong point is not math.
I will give you that.
It's interesting. So last time we were talking about Niven, and Niven famously wrote a book called Ringworld, and I think he's trained as a physicist. I don't think he was actually a practicing physicist, but I think he did at least 1 degree in physics. And he spent a lot of time trying to get the math right on that. He invested a lot of time, and then people still wrote in and said, "Nope, you overlooked this and you overlooked that, and you need to account for this." And so
well, I mean, he gave us numbers because he wanted us to see the data that they were seeing to make us understand why this was so intimidating, why it was so scary. But he really did a poor job, and I'm not looking for 3-digit precision. I'm just looking for some form of correlation. Between the blanket statement 15% loss rate, between what we see, a 67% loss rate.
I admire your pedantry.
This is something that writers do that annoy me. If you're going to dangle a fact in front of your readers, you should expect that at least some of your readers are going to pursue that.
Yep.
Yep. It's something I try to be mindful of when I attempt to write.
So you mentioned earlier in terms of structure these sidebars, and this is where you're getting your numbers from, is one of these sidebars. And that was another structurally is one of the things I really enjoyed about the book. These sort of I don't know, they're almost like Post-it notes inside the manuscript, which you can ignore, or they're like side quests,
Yeah.
You're reading the main narrative, and then, side quest. You can go off and read some details about whatever. And it's like a credit report or statistics about launches or classified ads.
Classified ads are fun,
Yeah, they're really fun. They add a lot to the world building. I really love the format of those. Yeah.
Yep. And they telegraph the ending a little bit.
Do they? That's interesting.
They do.
How so? I mean,
this is spoiler central. If you want to go there now. There are numerous different ways and there's a lot of them. They pop up on maybe 4 out of every 10 pages. There's a series that's astronomical lectures. Right, and this is a reasonable thing to have.
Yes.
But of that series of astronomical lectures, like one of them deals with neutron stars, and 2 or 3 of them mention black holes.
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, the end of the story deals with the fact that he and his crew of 2 ships are sent to the same spot at the same time, and holy crap, it's a black hole.
Yeah.
So he telegraphed that just a little bit. And then I'm wondering, so they described, the environment inside the black hole. And it's this blue thing. It's just this huge blue mottled horizon that it hurts to look at because it's so dim.
Is it because it's so dim or because it's so, I know there's a nothingness in the center of it that's really dim, but there's also the blueness comes from, I don't know how to pronounce this, Cherenkov radiation?
Yeah, I believe so.
So that's probably pretty bright, and there's probably a lot of X-rays mixed in with that visible light. So that's going to hurt to look at.
Yeah, but the name of the bar that they spend all their time in on Gateway is Blue Hell.
Blue Hell. Okay.
So I'm wondering, if he's actually telegraphing this from day one on Gateway, right?
Interesting.
Because the lectures, the astronomical lectures, start to mention, they mention the neutron star, and then they mention black hole, black hole, black hole, and that accelerates to the end of the book as we're coming into it. So, as I was reading this, I'm like, this has got to be, this is signaling something, right? There's going to be a black hole in our future.
That's fascinating. So that didn't happen for me because I probably read this book when I was young enough that I just didn't pick up on that correlation. And now I've read it so many times that I already know the ending that I don't pick up on these signals in the same way. Yeah. So that didn't have that effect for me. But that is interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if you're looking for, so I actually went through this twice. It was a short read, so why not? Again, once you know what the ending is, as you start looking at the psychological sessions, all the way through, Rob is incredibly dismissive of the robot's fascination with his dreams. But when you start looking at the symbology in the dreams, it's very blatant.
Yeah. There's also a big one when he talks about performing oral sex on his partner. Yep. And it's just like, that's kind of a groaner. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I don't know if you've looked up the name of the sequel, but it ties into this. It is called Beyond the Blue Event Horizon.
I looked, because the book has got the names of the sequels, the series printed there, but I looked at it and I didn't process it. I didn't actually read it.
Yeah. So side note about the availability of these books, it's very weird. There are 6 books. I've only read the first 5. I didn't know there was a 6th. And
maybe I'm lying to you. Maybe there are only 5.
I think there are 6. Because I just bought the 6. The 6 is available on Kindle. Most of the rest are not, except somehow I owned the first book, Gateway, on Kindle, and is no longer available to purchase on Kindle. So I don't know how that happened. I don't know if they somehow lost the U.S. distribution rights, the electronic book. It's very bizarre.
It could be.
And book 2 is also available on Kindle. And then books 3 and 4 and 5 are only available in hardback, paperback, and audiobook. So
let's see. This that I have in my hands was printed in 2004. And as of 2004, there were only 5 books in the Heechee saga.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I think book 6 is fairly recent.
So I noticed, we had talked back in when we talked about have spacesuit real travel.
Yes.
The author made just an offhand reference to the Russell diagram. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And we both commented that, they were expecting a lot, A, for us to believe that this teenage kid had a working knowledge of what the Russell diagram was, and B, that we had a working knowledge of what the Russell diagram was, which neither of us do. And they refer to that several times in this book, although they give us it's the Hertzsprung Russell diagram.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a separate Russell diagram or the same Russell diagram.
I think it's the same one, and they're just giving credit to Hertzsprung, which they don't always do. Like something, one person will popularize a thing, and then later someone will go back and say, actually this other guy was working on the same stuff at the same time, and they'll attach his name to it later.
The Nyquist theorem versus the Shannon-Nyquist theorem.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to find out when this book 6 was written, because I think it was fairly recent. First published in 2005, which is considerably after 1977.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
well, the year after this book that I have that I borrowed from the library was published.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting back to the idea of favorites, I felt pretty comfortable. I know there was at least one book that I recommended for us to read that was my stinker. I can't remember what it was now. I was just like, I haven't read this in a while, and now I remember why, and it wasn't a good choice. This is a book that I read early on. This is sort of like my surefire thing for picking favorites. Something that I read and fell in love with early on. They get really attached to those books, but also that I continue to dip into again and again and again over the years, and it holds up. And this is one of those books for me that I think I read this first in high school. And I think I've read it, at least once every 10 years since then. And I just really enjoy this whole sequence.
Well, it apparently won both the Hugo and the Nebula.
That's
So
also a good sign.
that's usually a good sign indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so closing thoughts on Gateway?
That's it. Go read Gateway. Find a copy however you can, read it, and then read the rest if you like mind-blowing science fiction.
It definitely, like we said, it's got some really cool big ideas, and yet it's still a relatively accessible read.
Yeah.
All right. I haven't told you what my next pick is going to be.
Oh, I haven't even thought about what my next pick is going to be. Go ahead and surprise me with it as we preview it.
This is going to be a John Stakely book, one of two. Can you guess?
I am guessing it is Armor.
Armor. It is indeed Armor. The quintessential armored power suit combat book.
That's such a good book. I haven't read it in a while. I'm looking forward to reading it again.
Same. It's just one of those things that popped in my... I think we were talking actually about Starship Troopers at some point. And I started to realize I was conflating the combat series in Starship Troopers with stuff I had read in Armor.
It's so different. Yeah.
Yeah, Armor's so good. Anyway, so that you have that to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
I feel like I said that poorly. You have that to look forward to. Okay.
Also, yeah.
All right. Well, we will see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.